Now, when you went over chapter 23 material, you learned about the first aorist. And the first aorist is just another way of forming the aorist tense. When we learn first aorist and second aorist, then, what we have to understand is that these are not really different tenses. They're really just different ways of forming the same tense. Okay? And as an example, when we, in English, want to form the past tense, what's the most frequent or common way we do it? Yeah, adding ed. Okay? So examples, we can have I bake for the present, past, I baked, right? Or I lick, and in the past I licked. Okay? And you could say, if you wanted to put it this way, that in English we have a first past and a second past. The first past is adding ed. The second past is doing other things like vowel change. What do I mean by that? Well, take a verb like I come, and what's the past tense? It's not going to add the D or the ED here. It's I came. What have I done here? I've merely changed the vowel, and it's become past tense, right? All right. And I can come up with a bunch of these as well, but they're not as frequent as the other form. So you could say, well, we have a first past and a second past in English, but are they really different tenses? Nope. They're just different ways of forming the same tense, aren't they? They're both past tense. They have the same semantics. The only difference is that, we form them differently, and the verbs themselves are different actions. All right? And that's what we have here with first and second aorist. They're just different ways of forming the same tense. The first aorist uses a tense formative, which is what? I'm sorry? The tense formative? Sigma alpha. The second aorist, what's a tense formative? It doesn't have one, so it's nothing. Okay? That's the big difference here. They use the same augment. They use the same personal endings, the secondary endings. All right? But it's the fact that we have different tense formatives. And since sigma alpha has a vowel at the end of it, there's no connecting vowel. Whereas for the second aorist, since we're not using a tense formative, we do use connecting vowels. All right? So that's going to be the main difference. Now, when we use the tense formative sigma alpha, we're using a tense formative that's very similar to another tense formative you've already learned, and that is the future tense formative sigma, right? Okay, so you have to be careful and make sure that you can identify, that you can tell the difference between future forms and first aorist forms. And so this little handout is designed to just help you practice that, okay? So just take it out. We're going to do it together here in class. Look at lucite. Compare that with elusite. Which one of these is future and which one's aorist? The first one is future. Good. How do you know that? The sigma. But the first aorist has a sigma. Okay, but it's, yes. If it's aorist, I'm looking for sigma alpha in most cases, right? So this one's the aorist. All right, good. How would you translate lucite? Future. That's future. And it's te, which is who? You, plural. So you will loose. You will loose. What's elusite? Yeah, it's past time and simple past. You loosed. It's active, okay? So you loosed, or y'all loosed. Look at the next one. I have agapesas. Agapesas. What is that? Is that future or aorist? It's aorist. How do you know that's aorist? Okay, I've got a sigma alpha. And, yes, right here I've got an augment. Futures don't augment. They might take the transformative sigma, but they don't augment. So notice lucite doesn't have an augment in front of it. And it's the future is going to use the primary endings too, right? Aorist will use the secondary endings. So when they're different, we should be able to tell. Agapeses or agapeses, that's future. Translate, agapesas. That sigma's who? Second singular. You what? You loved. Agapeses, you will love. Okay. Look at edzesa. This is from the verb zao. I live. Zao. Edzesa. Future or aorist? Aorist. Zeso? Future. Who's the subject of edzesa? This is first singular. I lived. Zeso? I will live. Future. Okay? I will live. Look at blepse. Future or aorist? Future. There's no augment, right? And the lexical form is blepo. What has happened to my P? Yeah, when I add the P and the sigma alpha, those become C, right? And if I add just a sigma for the future, that becomes C. I'm sorry, I should have gone over here. Okay, so this is future. Eblipsen is aorist. See the augment of the aorist? Both of them are going to get the psi. All right. Which person and number is blepse? Third singular. Good. So translate this. He, she, or it will see. Good. And eblipsen? He, she, or it saw. That's right. Now, I have ebaptisamen from baptizo. Future or aorist? Aorist. Good. Clearly, augment sigma alpha, right? Baptisamen, future. Translate. Ebaptisamen. Who's men? First plural, so that's we, and it's past time. Yes, we baptized. How come you have not been baptized? All right, we baptize. Baptisamen, we will baptize. Good. Thalesusin, future or aorist? Future. Compare that with athalesan. That's aorist. Augment here, right? No augment here. How am I going to translate this? What person is usin? Yeah, in the primary endings, it's third plural in the active. Here, ethelesa with a new ending, that is also third plural, but it's secondary, not primary active. Okay, so they, what? Thelesusin? Future, will desire. Aorist, athelesan? They desired. Simple past. Okay? Does all that make sense? See that? All right, good. Now let's look at the middle forms here and also practice distinguishing between the future middle and the aorist middle. One of the things that I do want to remind you of is that when we're in the aorist tense, okay, in the aorist, middle does not equal passive, okay? In the imperfect and in the present, okay, middle and passive forms are identical to each other. That's not true in the aorist. So when we learn the aorist middle and we're parsing such a form, Do not also call it the aorist passive. The aorist passive will actually use a different tense formative than the aorist middle does, and they'll use different endings as well. So we're just focusing on middle forms. This is true for the aorist and the future, by the way. The future passive is going to be different from the future middle. All right, so let's look at lusomai. Compare that with elusamein. Lusomai, elusamein. Which one is future? Middle. Clearly, this first one is future. There's no augment. That means that it's not a past time form, so it's got to be future if it's one of the two. And then notice that my ending here is a primary ending. It's primary middle passive, first singular. And compare that with elusamein. Here I have the augment, and then I have the sa, and then I have the first singular personal ending, but here it's the first singular in the primary middle, the secondary middle passive endings. Okay, so this one is the aorist middle. All right, so remember, when we're dealing with middle forms and their meanings, all of these forms that we're going to look at do have active forms. So the middle form is going to add the constraint semantically that not only is the subject performing the action, but also is in some way affected by the action. So lusomai, I will loose. And some people like to translate the middle generically as something like I will loose for myself. I don't really prefer that, but if that helps you to distinguish it from the active, then fine. Elusamein, I loosed. Okay, I loosed or loosed for myself. Okay, so let's look at the next set. We have agapeso. And here, I have a mistake here. This should actually not be agapesu. It should be agapese. All right? With an eta and a iota subscript. So what's the difference between these two? One's future, one's aorist. Here, this is from agapao. I have the alpha lengthened into an eta. This is clearly an augment. And then that looks like just a future tense sigma, though. And so if I have what looks like a future tense sigma, but I have augmentation, it can't be future. This has got to be a first aorist form. Over here I have agapese. There I have the sigma of the future and no augmenting. So this one's the future form. But let's talk about what happened here. For the aorist, I did augment, and what I was doing here is I was adding to the sigma, should have been a sigma alpha, and then the personal ending sa, which is the secondary middle passive second person singular form. What happens here? Sigma intervocalically drops out, alpha and omicron will contract, and this becomes, at the end of the day, sigma with an omega here, which is what we have. Okay? So this is second person singular. Aorist middle, second singular. Here, agapese, this is really supposed to be agape se psi. Now, psi and sa are both second singular, but psi is the primary middle passive second singular. Again, intervocalic sigma falls out. The epsilon and the alpha will contract and become an eta, and the iota will subscript under. And so I'm left with se. Okay? And so that's the form here. So again, that's also second singular, but a primary form in the middle passive. So agapeso is you loved in the middle. Future, you will love. Okay? You loved, you will love. The third set, I have edzesamein, and dzesamai. Dzesamai. Is this future or aorist? Well, the augment before the zeta is helping me here. That is clearly a past time form, so this would have to be the aorist. And the sa, tense formative, also helps. So that is aorist. The personal ending main is first singular in the secondary middle passive forms. So this is I, and then zao is the lexical form to live. So this is I lived. Okay? I lived. Remember, middle forms, the subject is performing the action and also is somehow affected by the action too. Zesamai, on the other hand, has no augment, and it has the sigma but no alpha, so this is future middle. Zesamai. This is I will live, and notice the my ending is also for singular, but it's different from main because this is primary middle passive, main is secondary middle passive. Next, blepsiste. Blepsiste. We'll compare that with eblepsaste. Eblepsaste. What do I have here? First one is future. There's no augment, and I just have a P plus a sigma, and then the connecting vowel and stay for second plural middle passive. That's going to be the primary middle passive second person plural. So this is you or y'all will see. Y'all will see, or y'all will see for yourselves. Okay. Here I have the augment with blep, and then the P and the sigma of sigma alpha have joined together to form the psi. So this is the first aorist. Eblepsa ste. Ste is the second person plural middle passive ending in both the primary and the secondary endings. Okay, so this is y'all or you, but here it's past, simple past. You or y'all saw. And again, middle forms have the subject performing the action and in some sense affected by the action too. Finally, I have ebaptisanta versus baptisantai. The epsilon and the sigma alpha. Tell me this is first aorist, no augment, and just the plain sigma. Tell me this is future. But I want you to notice as well, ta versus tai. These are both third plural, but the first one is the secondary, third person plural, middle passive. Tai is primary, third person plural, middle passive. Okay? And this is secondary because it's aorist, it's augmented. So this is going to be they baptized. They baptized. They baptized. Maybe they baptized their clothes. Maybe they baptized their hands. Who knows? Over here, it's they will baptize. Okay? So there you go. That's the difference between the future and the aorist, first aorist, and the middle voice.